Picture a bathtub. Now imagine you haven't seen one in 4 months. Not because you're lazy, not because you forgot, but because the nearest bathtub is 200 miles away, behind you, in a town you left in March, and you won't see another one until November. If the winter doesn't kill you first, and if the cattle don't stampede you into a canyon, and if the river crossing doesn't sweep you and your horse into a current that nobody's coming to fish you out of. That's the American West in 1873. Add to that, you're sleeping on the ground every night. Your saddle is your pillow. Your blanket is a single wool thing that smells like horse sweat and wood smoke, and something you've decided never to think about too hard. The temperature dropped 40 degrees after sundown, and somewhere out in the dark beyond your campfire, there are coyotes having a conversation about your cattle, and at least one of your fellow cowboys snores loud enough to cause a small stampede if the herd is nervous. That's your bedroom. Now add rattlesnakes. Because this is Texas, and we're going to be honest about Texas. They like warmth. So in the morning, when you wake up stiff and cold and desperately wanting coffee, there is a genuine, non-trivial chance that something venomous has been sleeping next to you for warmth. In your boots, specifically. Which is why every cowboy who wants to live to 35 checks his boots before putting them on. Every single morning. Without exception. This is real. This happened to real people. People who had names and families and who got paid. And I'll tell you what they got paid because it's going to make you feel things. To do one of the most physically demanding, genuinely dangerous, profoundly isolated jobs in American history. We're going to live it tonight. One cattle drive, one cowboy. Everything he saw and smelled and endured and occasionally enjoyed, because there were good moments too, and I'll give them to you fair. Here we go. Your eyes open to a sky full of stars. For a half second, that particular half second between sleep and consciousness, you don't know where you are. You see stars, you feel cold, you feel the hard ground underneath you, and then it hits you. The smell. It's not one smell, it never is out here. There's horse. That's the base layer. Warm and animal and overwhelming because the Remuda is picketed 30 feet away and the wind is coming from that direction. There are 12 horses in the Remuda, and 12 horses produce a considerable amount of smell. Underneath that, wood smoke from the campfire that's been burning all night, banked low, because someone always has to tend it, and that someone tonight was the night guard who you can hear now, coughing softly as he rides the perimeter of the herd, and underneath the smoke, something cooking. Cookie. That's what everyone calls the cook. That's what cowboys called every chuck wagon cook. Cookie. Cookie has been up since 3 a.m, and there is coffee and there is something frying in the cast iron, and your stomach responds to this information with immediate, urgent enthusiasm. And then underneath all of it, you, yourself. 4 months of trail dust and dried sweat and lanolin from the cattle and river water and prairie grass, all baked into your clothes, your skin, your hair. The particular smell of a human being who has not bathed since April, which is fine, because everyone around you smells the same. You stopped noticing it about 6 weeks in. You'll notice it again the first time you walk into a town, when you see the look on people's faces, and you'll understand then that you've gone feral in a particular way that only the trail produces. Welcome to the Chisum Trail, somewhere in Indian Territory in the summer of 1873. You're on your back on the hard ground of the Oklahoma prairie, and the stars above you are beginning to fade at the eastern edge where dawn is threatening. Your name is James Calloway, Everyone calls you Cal. You're 22 years old. You came up from South Texas, a little town called Cuero, which most people have never heard of and never will, with a letter from your uncle that got you a job with a rancher named Benjamin Archer, who is currently asleep in his bedroll 50 feet away, and who will have opinions about how quickly you get up this morning. You rode into Archer's spread in February with a horse, a saddle, a bedroll, a six-shooter that you're not particularly good with, and the absolute bedrock conviction that the cattle business was going to be your way out of Cuero, Texas. The cattle business has been testing that conviction every single day since March. The cook, whose name is actually Theodore Washington, but who has been cookie so long he probably forgot, is clanking something against the Dutch oven in a way that is clearly a signal. The signal says, "Get up." The signal says, "There is food, but it will not wait." The stars fade. The eastern sky goes from black to dark blue to something almost purple. You sit up and immediately check your boots. Your boots are fine. No snakes today. This is not a guarantee. This is not something you take for granted. This is a piece of morning information that you receive with genuine relief every morning, the way other people might receive good news about their health. You pull the boots on, they're stiff with cold, and they've been wet 3 times in the last week, and they're starting to crack at the right heel in a way that concerns you. And you stand up and your back makes a sound like someone stepping on a bundle of sticks. The ground is hard. The ground is always hard. There is no version of sleeping on the Oklahoma prairie in 1873 where the ground is not hard. You've tried every configuration. Saddle under your head. Bedroll folded double. Choosing a patch of ground that looks softer and invariably isn't. It doesn't matter. The ground wins. The ground always wins. You're stiff from your shoulders to your ankles and you're cold. It dropped to maybe 50 degrees last night, which doesn't sound like much until you've been sleeping outside for 4 months and your body has completely lost its ability to regulate anything, and you are deeply, fundamentally tired in a way that sleep doesn't fully fix, because you were in the saddle for 12 hours yesterday, and you'll be in the saddle for 12 hours today. But the coffee is real, and it is the most important thing that happens to you every morning, and you are going to have some. The chuck wagon is parked at the edge of camp, the way it always is, with the tailgate folded down to create a workspace. Cookie's got the coffee in the big black pot. It holds about 3 gallons, and it's always almost empty by the time the drive gets moving. He's also got something in the skillet that turns out to be salt pork and the last of the potatoes cut thin and fried until they're brown at the edges. You take your cup, tin, dented, yours. The one thing in this world that is absolutely yours and that you guard with a fierceness that probably seems unreasonable, and you fill it and you drink standing up, staring east at the sky that's turning colours you couldn't name even if you tried. Orange, pink, something between gold and copper. The Oklahoma sky at sunrise is one of those things. Let me tell you something about the Chisum Trail because you need to understand what you're part of. The Chisum Trail in 1873 is maybe the most important commercial route in America. It runs from the ranches of South Texas, from places like Cuero, from the brushy country along the Nueces River, all the way north through Indian Territory to the railheads in Kansas, specifically to Wichita or Ellsworth or Abilene. The trail is named after Jesse Chisholm, a Cherokee Scottish trader who blazed the northern part of the route in 1867. He wasn't a cattleman. He was moving trade goods, not beef, but cattle drives followed his wagon tracks north and the name stuck. Since 1867, something like 1.5 million cattle have walked this trail. 1.5 million animals. The trail is, in places, wide enough to see from a mile away. Not because it's paved, not because anyone built it, but because that many cattle have walked the same ground so many times that the grass is gone and the earth is churned into dust, and the landscape itself has been permanently rearranged by the weight of all those hooves. You're currently moving about 1,200 head of longhorn cattle north toward Wichita. The drive has been going since March. You left Cuero with a crew of 12 men, the trail boss, Benjamin Archer, 6 cowboys, including you, the cook, a horse wrangler whose job is specifically to manage the remuda, and 2-point riders who work ahead of the herd. It is now July. You have been on this trail for 4 months. You have approximately 6 weeks to go. Cookie's real name, Theodore Washington, is a story in itself. He was born enslaved in Missouri in 1835. He came west after the war with a cattle outfit out of Abilene, learned the trade from a Mexican cook named Rodrigo who'd been doing it since the Texas Revolution, and has been running chuck wagons for 15 years. He is 58 years old, which on the cattle trail makes him roughly equivalent to ancient. He is also, without any competition or debate, the most important person on this drive. Let me explain why, because it's not immediately obvious. The trail boss, Archer, makes the decisions. He decides when you move and where you bed down and when to push the herd and when to rest them and where to cross the rivers. But Cookie controls the food and water and the campfire and the medical supplies, which are kept in the chuck wagon's boot, a canvas compartment at the back that holds everything from laudanum to needles and thread to a bottle of whiskey that Cookie calls medicinal and that everyone respects enough not to steal. A good cook keeps the crew fed and relatively healthy over months on the trail. A bad cook, bad food, inconsistent meals, no coffee, and you have a crew of exhausted, underfed men doing one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Cookie is a very good cook. This morning's salt pork and fried potatoes are, by objective standards, not remarkable. The potatoes are getting old, and the pork is preserved in enough salt to cure a hide. But everything has been cooked exactly right. The potatoes are crisp. The pork fat has been rendered down to something almost sweet. And after 4 months of trail food, your standards have adjusted to the point where this tastes genuinely excellent. You eat standing up. Everyone eats standing up usually. There's no time to sit down. The cattle are restless. They're always restless in the morning, stirring and lowing, and the night guard has been keeping them calm since midnight, and they need to start moving soon before the heat of the day gets going. The crew gathers, 6 cowboys, plus the trail boss, plus Cookie, plus the wrangler. Tom Weeks, who is 19 and from Victoria, and who has been on one drive before and acts like this makes him an expert. He means well. He's riding his second to last year of youth and doesn't know it. Pete Garza, who is from a ranching family in the Rio Grande Valley, who speaks English with the Spanish rhythm that makes everything he says sound like a verdict. He's the best rider among you, the best horseman. Watching him work a horse is like watching someone have a private conversation with an animal. Ned Colley, who is 43 and has been doing this since before you were born and who has opinions about everything and shares them freely, and whose opinions are, annoyingly, almost always correct. 2 others, brothers from Georgia named Hector and Davis Fenn, who stick together and communicate largely through looks and who are fine with the work, but who you've never fully figured out in 4 months. And you, Cal Calloway, 22, from Cuero, with boots that are cracking at the heel and a tin cup that's your most important possession, and a creeping, growing competence that you're starting to notice in yourself with something between pride and surprise. Before we go further, you need to understand what 1,200 longhorn cattle actually are. And when I say understand, I need you to understand what that means in terms of physical reality. Because there's a way that people think about cattle in a casual sense. Farm animals, placid, standing in fields, that is completely and entirely wrong when you're talking about Texas longhorns on a trail drive. These are not docile animals. Texas longhorns were bred from Spanish cattle that went feral for 2 centuries in the Texas brush country. They survived without human help. They survived predators and drought and heat and cold, and they came out the other side as a breed that is genuinely, fundamentally wild in a way that domesticated cattle are not. They are large. A mature longhorn bull weighs over 1,000 pounds. The cows are smaller but not small, and the horns are the thing. A mature longhorn has a horn spread that can reach 6 feet tip to tip. 6 feet. That's wider than most doorways. That's the wingspan of a large bird. And those horns are not decorative. They are real bone, real weight, and a frightened or angry longhorn will absolutely use them. 1,200 of these animals moving together is a force of nature. You've seen what they can do in a stampede. You've seen it once. About 6 weeks into the drive, a thunderstorm came up from the southwest with no warning, and a bolt of lightning hit a tree 20 yards from the herd. The crack of it, the light, the herd moved. That's the word people use. The herd moved. It sounds almost peaceful. What it actually means is 1,200 animals, each weighing somewhere between 800 and 1,200 pounds, all deciding simultaneously to go somewhere else right now, and the ground shaking under it like a small earthquake. And the sound is something between thunder and a waterfall and the end of the world. And if you're in the wrong place, if your horse goes down, if you fall... Ned Colley has a long scar from his right shoulder to his elbow from a stampede 3 years ago. He was lucky. He's told you that twice. He was very lucky. You've been careful since then. You're careful in a way you weren't in March. The herd this morning is calm. They slept reasonably well. They're grazing on the short grass and the led steers. The same few animals who always walk at the front, who are smarter than the others, and who the herd follows, are moving in the right direction. This is a good morning. You've learned to recognize good mornings. Archer makes a circuit of the camp, drinking coffee, talking to the night guard who's just coming off shift. He's a lean man, 40-something, taciturn in the way that people who've been making life or death decisions for years sometimes get. He doesn't waste words. He doesn't waste energy. He's been on more trail drives than you can count, and it shows in the way he moves through the world. Economical, deliberate, always looking at the horizon. Moving in an hour, he says. To no one in particular. To everyone. You finish your coffee. You rinse your cup at the water barrel Cookie keeps lashed to the side of the chuck wagon. You go find your horse. Your horse is a grey gelding named Grey. This is not the most creative name, but you didn't name him. He came with the drive, part of Archer's remuda, and the previous owner had named him Grey because he is grey, and the name stuck. Grey is 9 years old. He's been on 3 cattle drives. He knows things you don't. Let me explain how the remuda works, because it's one of those systems that makes no sense until you understand why it exists. Every cowboy on a cattle drive has not one horse but a string of them, anywhere from 4 to 8 horses per man. These horses rotate throughout the day, because a horse working a cattle drive can handle about 4 to 6 hours of real work before it needs rest. The herd moves 12 to 15 miles a day usually. The cattle themselves walk that distance. But your horse is not walking. Your horse is walking, trotting, cantering, cutting, spinning, stopping hard, starting fast, doing the constant athletic work of keeping 1,200 animals moving in the right direction. You can't do that on one horse. The horse would be dead in a week, so you rotate. Morning horse, afternoon horse, sometimes an evening horse if there's trouble. The wrangler, a 16-year-old named Miguel whose father works for Archer, and who is the best horseman you've ever seen, manages the remuda, moves it alongside. The drive has the right horse ready when you need it. Grey is your morning horse. You've ridden him every morning for 4 months. You know him the way you know the inside of your boots. You know that he's calm around cattle, unless a longhorn gets too close to his face, at which point he goes sideways fast. You know that he spooks at certain birds. Not all birds, specific birds, larger ones that come up suddenly from the grass. You know that he drinks better from moving water than still, and that he's slightly lame in the left foreleg in cold mornings for the first 10 minutes until he warms up, and that this has been true his whole life and won't hurt him. You know his breathing rhythms, you know what his ears do before he shies, you know how he feels under you when he's relaxed versus when he's nervous. After 4 months on the trail, you and Grey have logged somewhere around 700 hours together. That's more time than you've spent with almost any human being in your life. The relationship between a cowboy and his horse is not sentimental, it's functional. You are partners in a working situation where both of you have responsibilities and both of you need the other to do their job right. But 4 months is 4 months, and you'd be lying if you said there wasn't something there. You saddle him in the grey pre-dawn, in the light of the rising sun. He stands patient. He's done this so many times. This is the thing I promised you at the start, and I want to give it to you properly. Why do cowboys sleep fully dressed? The answer is not one thing. The answer is never one thing with any historical question worth asking. The answer is several things stacked on top of each other, each one making perfect sense once you understand the situation. First, the cold. The prairie at night, even in summer, is cold. The temperature on the Oklahoma and Kansas prairies can drop 40, 50 degrees after sundown. During the day in July, you might be sweating through everything you own in 100-degree heat. By midnight, it's 60 degrees. By 3 in the morning, it's 55. 50. Your blanket is one blanket, maybe two if you're lucky, and the ground pulls heat out of you from below, and the wind comes across the open prairie from whatever direction it decides to come from, and you are cold. Your clothes are your insulation. Every layer you're wearing is warmth you need. Second, time. Stampedes do not happen on a schedule. A thunderstorm does not send advance notice. A band of raiders, and yes, there are raiders on the trail in 1873, we'll get to that, does not knock first. When something happens at 2 in the morning, you have to be on your horse and moving in less than 30 seconds, not dressed and then on your horse. On your horse. You practice this, not formally, but you learn. After the first stampede, after the first night alarm, after watching Ned Colley be on his horse and cutting toward the herd before you fully processed that there's an emergency, you learn. You sleep dressed. You sleep with your boots within reach. You sleep with your horse picketed close. Because the 30 seconds it takes you to pull on your pants might be the difference between the herd going off a bluff and coming back around. And you are responsible for a portion of this herd, and the herd is the entire point of everything. Third, theft. Your clothes are your property. Your saddle is your property. Your boots are your property. In camp with 12 men, nothing is going to happen to your things. But you're not always in camp. Sometimes you're on night guard, riding the perimeter of the herd, and your bedroll is back at camp. Sometimes you're separated from the group for hours. Your clothes on your body cannot be stolen while you're sleeping in them. Fourth, and this is the one people don't think about, comfort. After 4 months on the trail, your clothes have shaped themselves to you. The denim of your pants has worn soft. Your shirt has lost its stiffness. Your boots have moulded to the shape of your feet. Taking them off and putting them back on is not more comfortable. It's less. The brief sensation of skin breathing is not worth the cold, the vulnerability, the time. You have adapted. You sleep in what you wear. You wake in what you wore. You work in what you slept in. The distinction between these states has become academic. There's a word for this, for the gradual adaptation of the human body and mind to conditions that would seem impossible at the outset. Soldiers talk about it. Explorers write about it. You discover it empirically, alone on the prairie at age 22, and you never quite name it. But you know it when you're in it. The drive starts moving. The process of getting 1,200 longhorns moving in a coherent direction every morning is controlled chaos that has, through weeks of repetition, become something close to choreographed. The point, riders, 2 experienced men who ride at the very front, go first, establishing the direction. They're navigating by landmarks, by Archer's instructions from the day before, by the generally understood knowledge of where the trail runs. In 1873, you don't need a map for the Chisum Trail. The trail is the map, you follow it. Behind the point riders, the lead steers find their position. These are the same animals every day. 3 or 4 older steers who've done this before and who understand, in whatever way cattle understand things, that their job is to walk north. The herd follows them the way they follow nothing else. The swing riders, that's you today, ride along the middle of the column, keeping the cattle from spreading out too far, pushing stragglers back into the flow. The drag riders, the worst position on the drive, the one that rotates fairly among the newer hands, ride at the very back, in the choking dust thrown up by 1,200 pairs of hooves, pushing the slowest animals, the ones who keep stopping to graze or who have gone lame. The chuck wagon goes around. Cookie takes the shortest route to the next camp, gets there first, has food ready when the drive arrives for the midday stop, and you ride. The walking pace of the herd is about 2 miles an hour. 2 miles an hour sounds slow. It is slow, but it's 1,200 animals moving together, and your job is not to go faster. Your job is to keep them moving, consistent, calm. No panicking, no spreading, no reversals. A good day on the trail is monotonous. You want monotonous. You have learned to love monotonous. Monotonous means nobody dies. Monotonous means the cattle don't stampede. Monotonous means you make your 15 miles and bed down and tomorrow is the same. The sun comes up fully and the heat begins and your hat, wide-brimmed, the only version of a hat that makes any sense in this landscape, becomes the most important thing you own. In 1873, the cowboy, hat is not yet a cultural symbol. It's not yet the thing it will become. Right now it's just a hat, a practical object, wide brim for sun, functional crown for water catchment in a pinch, durable enough to last a season. Your hat came from a store in San Antonio. It cost $2. It has been through everything this drive has thrown at you. It is battered and stained, and the brim has been reshaped by 4 months of prairie wind, and it is perfect. Around mid-morning, your thoughts turn to water. This happens every day. It starts around the same time, maybe 2-3 hours into the drive, when the sun is up enough to be serious about its heat, and the morning coffee is a memory, and the dust is bad, and your mouth is dry. Water is the central question of the Chisum Trail. The route was not chosen randomly. It was chosen specifically and deliberately because it crosses major rivers at regular intervals. The Colorado, the Brazos, the Red, the Wichita, the Canadian, the Arkansas, and follows smaller streams between them. The drovers who established the route were following water. They were following the arteries of a landscape that, in most other directions, will kill you through thirst. The cattle need water every day, not a small amount of water. A longhorn in summer heat drinks 30, sometimes 40 gallons a day. Multiply that by 1,200 cattle. You have 1,200 cattle. They need 48,000 gallons of water a day. That number is not a typo. That's the basic operational reality of a cattle drive. You are moving 48,000 gallons of water consumption on the hoof every single day, and your route is planned entirely around where that water exists. The rivers are the logistics, but the rivers in 1873 are also the danger, because rivers flood, because rivers run low in drought years, because rivers have quicksand along their banks that will swallow a horse and rider with a kind of terrible efficiency, because rivers in Indian Territory are sometimes where other people are, people who have their own opinions about 1,200 Texas cattle crossing their land. You've already crossed the Red River. That was 3 weeks ago. You remember it clearly because it scared you more than anything else on this drive except the stampede. The Red runs fast and broad in July. Snowmelt from the mountains mixed with plains runoff, and the crossing was maybe a quarter mile of churning red water. It's red because it carries so much sediment, so much Oklahoma clay, that it looks like something alive, like something bleeding. You swam your horse across. You kept your boots in the saddle in case the horse went under and you needed to swim free. You watched 3 cattle go down, swept off their feet, taken downstream, before the rest figured out the crossing. 3 cattle. Out of 1,200, that's barely a rounding error. By trail standards, that was a successful crossing. You were sick for an hour afterward, but you didn't let anyone see it. Here is what you're getting paid. $25 a month. That is your wage. $25 for 12 to 14 hour a day, 7 days a week, in conditions that are actively trying to kill you in multiple simultaneous ways. Let me make that concrete, because I promised you the math. In 1873, $25 is not nothing. A factory worker in the East might make $12 to $15 a month. A farmhand in the Midwest might make $10. A soldier in the US Army earns $13 a month, though his room and board are covered. But here's the thing, on the trail drive, your room and board are also covered. Cookie feeds you. You sleep on the ground, which costs nothing. You use Archer's horses, Archer's equipment. Your $25 is pure income, no expenses, except your boots, which cost $6 when you bought them in Cuero, and they're cracking at the heel, and you're going to need new. One's in Wichita, which will cost another $6 or $8. Your rope needs replacement. Your shirts are worn through in 2 places. These things cost, but still, by the time you reach Wichita, you'll have been on the trail for roughly 6 months. 6 months at $25 is $150. $150 in 1873. That's more than some men make in a year in Texas. That's enough to buy a modest horse. That's enough to stake a small operation. That's enough to give you options. That's why you're here. Not because you love the trail. Not because you think sleeping on the ground for 6 months is good time. But because $150 represents possibility in a world where possibility is scarce. And 22-year-old Cal Calloway from Cuero, Texas, is not in a position to be choosy about how he earns his possibilities. Ned Colley is doing this for his 37th time, more or less. He's lost count of the exact number. He makes more than you, $30 a month, because he's experienced, because Archer knows his value, and he spends most of it in Wichita every year and starts over in the spring. The money goes, Ned told you once, riding swing in the afternoon heat. You hit a town after months on the trail and you feel like a man who's been underwater for half a year, and you spend. It's not smart, I know it's not smart, but you do it. He looked at the horizon. Been doing it since 58. Let me tell you where you are. Indian Territory in 1873 is not an abstract political designation. It is a real place with real people and a real history that is simultaneously much older and much more complicated than the cattle drive narrative usually acknowledges. The 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole, were forcibly relocated here from their homelands in the East in the 1830s. The Trail of Tears. They were moved to this land with promises, formal, legal promises, treaty promises, that it would be theirs permanently. Permanently turned out to mean about 30 years, because Texas cattlemen found the trail through their land and started using it, and the federal government, which had made those promises, decided the promises were negotiable. The tribes did not see it that way. By 1873, there is a formal agreement. The cattle drives can use the trail through Indian Territory, but the drovers pay a toll. Typically 1 to 10 cents per head of cattle. On your drive of 1,200 head, that works out to somewhere between $12 and $120, depending on who's collecting and how the negotiation goes. Archer paid. You watched him do it 2 days after crossing the Red River at a small station run by a Cherokee man named John Proctor, who had a ledger book and a calm, businesslike manner that had absolutely nothing of the romantic about it. This was commerce. This was a man running a toll operation on his nation's land, and Archer paid the toll and Proctor wrote it in his book and you moved on. But not everyone pays. Some drovers try to run the toll or find alternate routes or argue about the rate. When they do, there are consequences. You've heard stories. You know what can happen to a drive that tries to cheat the tolls. Archer is not a man who cheats the tolls. It's their land, he said, the one time you asked about it. We're guests. Guests pay. You've thought about that more than you expected to. The drive stops at midday, not for long, not for a sit-down meal with time to rest. 20 minutes, half an hour if the cattle have found good grass and are settling without much pushing. Cookie has the wagon at a creek crossing, beans already hot, coffee refilled. You dismount, tie your horse to the wagon wheel and eat standing up. Beans and cornbread, dry enough to crumble but substantial. The coffee is the kind of coffee that has been boiling since before dawn and is now a different substance entirely. Thick and bitter and effective. You eat fast. Everyone eats fast. The cattle are grazing and the horse needs rest more than you do. And there's water in the creek for everyone. And for about 20 minutes the world is as close to peaceful as it gets out here. Ned Colley sits on the running board of the chuck wagon, which is the closest thing to furniture available. Heat's going to be bad this afternoon, he says. It's already bad. Worse later. He doesn't seem bothered by this. He seems like a man who has made peace with all weather conditions. River crossing tomorrow. Canadian. Water's been high. You've heard this. The Canadian river crossing is one of the harder ones on the trail. Wide, unpredictable, with sandy banks that can turn to quicksand depending on the conditions. How high? High enough. He eats a spoonful of beans. We'll see. This is what Ned's wisdom usually sounds like. Precise assessments followed by calm uncertainty. He doesn't pretend to know what he doesn't know, which is a rarer quality than it should be. Pete's horse is favouring the right front, he says, changing the subject the way conversations on the trail often change subject, without transition, because transitions take time. Since this morning? Since last night, probably. Miguel knows. Good kid, Miguel. Miguel, the wrangler, has already noticed. He's checked the horse, found a stone bruise. The horse will be fine with rest, but can't work today. Pete is on one of his backups, a sorrel with opinions about sudden movements. This is the texture of trail life. Problems identified and managed before they become crises. Information moving through the crew by word and observation, and the kind of attention that comes from living and working in the same small group of people for 4 months. You know these men, not in the way you know people from home, not with history, with shared childhood, with family connection. You know them in a more immediate physical way. You know how they ride. You know how they react to problems. You know who to stand next to if things go bad, and who to watch out for and who to ask for advice. The afternoon is the hard part. Morning has the benefit of being morning, fresh, cool, the coffee recent, the goal clear. Evening has the benefit of ending. The afternoon just is. Hours of heat and dust and the same landscape repeating itself in the way the southern plains repeat themselves, grass to horizon, sky above. Nothing to interrupt the monotony but occasional creek lines marked by cottonwood trees. You're on swing today, riding the right flank of the herd. Your job is straightforward and never-ending. Keep the animals moving, keep them from spreading. If one peels off, and they do constantly because cattle are curious and stupid and easily distracted, you chase it back in. If two get into a shoving match that threatens to split a section of the herd, you get between them and push. You do this for 6 hours. The dust is extraordinary. You're upwind of the herd, which helps, but the prairie dust gets into everything regardless of wind direction. Into your mouth, your eyes, your ears, into the fold of your bandana, into the crease of your knuckles. At the end of a day on the trail, you can write your name in the dust on the back of your hand. You wear your bandana over your mouth and nose most of the afternoon. This helps somewhat. This is also why, when someone does finally get you to a bathtub in Wichita, the water turns a particular colour that you will not describe because I want you to sleep. The heat. In July on the Oklahoma prairie, the afternoon temperature gets to 100 degrees regularly, sometimes more. There's no shade. The sky is wide and the sun is relentless, and the ground reflects the heat back up at you from below, and your horse is sweating, and you are sweating, and the cattle are sweating. And if the cattle overheat, if they get heat stressed, they stop moving and they won't be moved. And a herd that stopped moving in the wrong place is a problem that compounds very fast. So you manage the pace, move them fast enough to make miles, but not so fast they overheat. It's a balance. It's a judgment call. It's the kind of thing that Ned Colley can read at a glance, and that you're still developing. Around 3 in the afternoon, you switch horses. The grey goes back to the remuda, walking slow, breathing heavy. Your afternoon horse is a bay named Buck, who is not as comfortable to ride as Grey, but who has more energy. Miguel makes the switch at the edge of the herd, a little choreography of hands and reins and equipment that happens in about 90 seconds. You ride on. People have images of the West from 100 years of movies and paintings. Open land, big sky, dramatic landscapes. Here's the thing, some of that is true. The sky, specifically. The sky on the Oklahoma and Kansas plains in 1873 is something that has to be experienced to be understood, because it is so much bigger than anything you've seen before that it changes the way you think about space. If you grew up in the Texas hill country, you know sky the way most people know sky. Something above you, visible between trees, between hills, the frame of the world. On the plains, the sky is not framed. The sky is everything. You can see the weather coming from 40 miles away. You can watch a storm build from nothing, a smear on the western horizon at noon, a wall of black cloud by 3, lightning at 4, and track its approach for hours before it reaches you. You've learned to read the sky the way you learn to read your horse, what the clouds mean, what the wind shift means, when to start thinking about where to shelter, where to bed the herd, whether the lightning is going to be close or distant. The grass. The southern plains in 1873 still have the original grass, buffalo grass and bluestem and little bluestem and switchgrass, a mixture that has evolved over 10,000 years to survive drought and fire and the grazing of 30 million bison, which is what this land supported before the bison were hunted out. The grass is not uniform. It changes with the ground, with the moisture, with the elevation. You've learned to read it too. Good grass, the stuff the cattle will really work at, is the bluestem, tall, almost blue-green, dense. Buffalo grass is shorter, curly, more available in drier areas. The cattle prefer the bluestem, which means when they get to it they slow down, which means you have to push them, which means you push them. The beauty of the landscape is real. You're not immune to it. After 4 months you don't see it the way you did in March. Everything was new then, overwhelming, almost hallucinatory in its scale. Now it's familiar. Now it's home in the way that any place becomes home through extended exposure. But there are still moments. Late afternoon today the light comes in at an angle that turns the grass gold. Genuinely gold, not figuratively, a physical golden colour that you could almost touch. And the shadow of your horse is 20 feet long, and the cattle are moving steady, and the sky ahead is a blue so deep it's almost purple at the edges. It's beautiful. You notice it. You file it away. Then a steer on your left makes a break for a stand of cottonwoods near a creek, and you ride after it, and the moment is gone. But it was real. You noticed it. Now, the bath question. Why didn't cowboys bathe? The simple answer, no bathtubs, no facilities, is true, but incomplete. Let me give you the full picture. Water on the trail is precious. Not theoretically precious. Operationally precious. The water you carry on the chuck wagon is drinking water. Just drinking water for the crew. Cookie guards it with a fierceness that would be alarming if it weren't completely justified. In July heat, working 12-hour days, each man needs maybe 2 gallons of water a day just to stay functional. With a crew of 12, that's 24 gallons of drinking water per day, minimum. The wagon carries a barrel that holds about 40 gallons, which means about a day and a half of buffer if you don't hit a creek or river. You do not waste water. You don't wash with it. You don't clean your clothes with it. You don't fill a tub and sit in it. You drink it, and you give the horses enough to keep them going. and you move toward the next water source. When you hit a creek, you drink. The horses drink. The cattle drink. Which takes a while, given the arithmetic of 1,200 animals at 40 gallons each. And then you move. The rivers are where bathing is technically possible. And people do. You've bathed in the Red River briefly, mostly in the sense of falling in during the crossing and climbing out the other side. You've washed in a couple of creeks when there was time and the water was still and the water moccasins weren't visible. But here's the other thing nobody tells you about bathing on the trail. Getting clean is, in a sense, counterproductive. Your skin in its current state is a carefully calibrated system. The layer of trail dirt and sweat and lanolin from the cattle and dried mud and everything else. It's not pleasant, but it's protective. It keeps the sun from burning you quite as badly. It keeps the insects from finding you quite as easily. It keeps the wind from drying your skin to cracking. The men who've been on the trail longer than you figured this out empirically. You don't have the vocabulary for it. You don't have the biology. But you've noticed that after the one real wash in the Red River, your face burned worse the next 3 days than it had before. You haven't mentioned this to anyone, but you've noticed. And then there's the soap question. Soap in 1873 is lye soap, harsh, alkaline, made from animal fat and wood ash. Using it on your face and hands is fine in moderation when you have access to clean water to rinse with. Using it on your body while standing in a creek in Indian Territory when there are rattlesnakes on the bank and you need to be dressed and mounted in 30 seconds if something goes wrong with the herd. It's just not practical. You stop thinking of cleanliness the way you thought of it in March. Cleanliness in Cuero meant weekly bathing in a wash tub, with your mother heating water on the stove. Cleanliness on the trail means your hands are clean enough to handle food, your eyes are clear, your wounds are tended. Everything else is dust and sweat and the smell of horses and cattle and campfire smoke, and that's what you are now, and the world will have to accommodate it. The Canadian River crossing is the next day. Archer sends Tom Weeks and Pete Garza ahead to scout it at first light. That's standard procedure before any major crossing. They ride down to the bank, look at the water, check the bottom, find the best entry and exit points. They come back looking thoughtful. It's swimmable, Pete says, but the sand on the south bank is soft. We'll need to bring them in fast or they'll get stuck. Archer nods. He's done this before. He adjusts the plan. The crossing starts around 9 in the morning. The lead steers go in first. They know the routine. They've crossed rivers before. The herd has crossed several. And they take the water steadily, moving into the current at the angle Archer has chosen. The river grabs them. They fight it. They keep moving. The rest of the herd follows. This is the part that's hard to convey in words. 1,200 cattle entering a river simultaneously creates a sound and a sight that has no comparison. The splashing alone is like rain, like something between rain and a waterfall. The bellowing and the chaos, cattle pushing against each other, some going under briefly and coming back up, the riders in the river trying to keep them moving in the right direction. You're on the downstream flank and your job is to keep anything from being swept past you. 3 cattle go down. Not all of them come back up. You don't watch it happen. You can't afford to watch it happen. You're managing your own horse, managing your own crossing, keeping your eyes on the animals in your section. But you hear the shouts from the other riders, and you know what the shouts mean. By the time the last steer climbs the north bank, shaking water from its hide, the sun is high and everyone is wet and Archer is counting. 1194. He lost 6. 6 out of 1,200. He writes it in his tally book without expression. You sit on your horse on the north bank of the Canadian River, dripping, watching Archer make that note, and you think about those 6 animals, about what they represent, about what it costs. Then you ride on, because the herd is moving and you have to move with it. Midnight, your turn. The night guard is 2 men riding slow circles around the sleeping herd. You do 2 hours on, 4 hours off, rotating through the night. Everyone takes a turn, even Archer. The purpose is obvious. Keep the cattle calm, watch for predators, watch for anything that might spook them into a run. The coyotes are the constant. They stay at the edge of the firelight, yipping and howling, keeping a respectful distance from the herd but never quite going away. You've gotten used to the coyotes. You've gotten used to the way the cattle shift and murmur when the coyotes are close. A kind of low-level unease that doesn't build into panic as long as you're there and visible and calm. Your horse walks the circuit. The stars are. And I know I keep coming back to this, but it deserves emphasis. Extraordinary. No electric light in 1873. No city glow. No light pollution of any kind. The sky over the Oklahoma plains at midnight is the sky as it actually is, which is so dense with stars that the Milky Way is visible as a physical presence. Band of light that you can see the structure of, and the whole thing moves, slowly, glacially, and there are shooting stars regular enough that you stop making wishes after the first month because there are too many to wish on. You ride the circle. The cattle are sleeping. Most of them. Some stand. Cattle don't always lie down to sleep, they're not horses. And the standing ones are pale shapes in the darkness, breathing slow. You hum. This is what cowboys do on night guard. Not because it's pleasant or because you particularly feel like humming, but because the sound of a human voice, calm and continuous, settles the cattle. It tells them something is awake and watching, and not alarmed. It tells them the world is as it should be. You hum things you know, hymns from church and Cuero, though that feels like a different life. Songs your mother sang. A tune you heard in a saloon in San Antonio once that lodged in your memory despite never knowing the words. The horse walks. The stars wheel. And in the quiet, in the specific quiet of the plains at 2 a.m, with 1,200 sleeping cattle and the coyotes making their distant conversation and the fire at camp burning low, you have your clearest thoughts of the day. What do you think about riding circles in the dark? Mostly home. What home means now, which is different from what it meant in March. Cuero, Texas is a small town in DeWitt County. It has a courthouse, 2 saloons, a general store, a Methodist church your family attended, a German bakery whose owner came over in 1848, and whose strudel you have genuinely missed since leaving. It has the creek that runs past the south edge of town, where you learned to fish at age 7. It has your parents' house, which is small and decent and which smells like your mother's cooking and your father's pipe tobacco. You think about these things with something that isn't quite homesickness. It's more complicated than that. Homesickness is wanting to go back. What you feel is more like recognition. You recognize those things as parts of who you were. You're not sure they fit the person you're becoming. The person who rode out of Cuero in February was someone who had never slept under an open sky, who had never crossed a major river on horseback, who had never managed frightened cattle in a thunderstorm, who had never made a split-second decision that affected the safety of 1,000 animals and 11 other people. That person is still in there. But there's someone else in there too, someone built by 4 months of this. Ned Colley has told you that the trail either takes something from you or gives you something, and sometimes both. He didn't elaborate. He's not an elaborating kind of man. But you think you understand what he meant, the things it takes. Comfort, cleanliness, convenience, the luxury of being able to ignore your physical environment, the ability to take a night's sleep for granted, the assumption that nothing will go wrong after dark. The things it gives, a specific kind of competence that you can feel in your hands and your balance and your decision-making, a knowledge of the land, this specific geography, that is so detailed it's almost cellular, and something harder to name, a sense that you have handled things, that when it went bad you were there. You didn't run, you did your job. That's not nothing. The horse walks, your 2 hours end. Hector Fenn comes out to relieve you, nodding as you pass. You go back to your bedroll. You do not remove your boots. You're asleep in 4 minutes, the last week before Wichita. You can feel it in the crew. Something changes in the energy, the same way a horse can feel a barn from miles away and starts moving with different intention. Everyone knows they're close. Archer knows it. Cookie knows it. He'd been rationing the beans more carefully, making the calculation of remaining trail days against remaining supplies. You start to see evidence of civilization. First, more tracks. The trail has always had tracks, hooves, wagon wheels, but now they multiply. Other drives are converging on the same railhead from different directions, and their passage shows in the churned-up ground. Then, people. A farm. An actual farm with a fence and a planted field. The first fence you've seen since Indian Territory. A family standing at the edge of their property watching the herd pass. Children. Small ones. You wave. They wave back. It's such a simple thing, and it hits you harder than you expect. Then, a town. A small one, before Wichita proper. Cows in pens along the road. Other drives already arrived, their cattle sorted and branded and waiting for the buyers. Men on horses and on foot. The particular mixture of trail-weary and town-eager that you recognize because it's what you're feeling. And the smell, under the cattle smell and the dust smell and the smoke smell, bread, bacon bread, coming from somewhere, in the town, a bakery, a hotel kitchen, something. You stop your horse for a moment, just smelling it. Pete Garza rides up alongside you. First time smelling a town after the trail, he asks. Is it obvious? He smiles. The corners of his eyes crinkle. He's 31 and has been on 8 drives. The bread gets everyone every time. My first drive, I cried. Just a little. Just for a second. He looks at you. Don't tell anyone I told you that. I won't. You ride into the last stretch toward Wichita, and the bread smell fades back into the prairie air, but you hold it in memory. Wichita in 1873 is not a large city. Let me put that in context, because the name carries a weight in history that the actual place in 1873 doesn't quite match. The famous Wichita, the Wichita of Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok and the rest of the mythology, is a small Kansas cattle town that exists almost entirely because the railroad arrived in 1872. The population is somewhere around 2,000 people. The downtown, and downtown is generous, is a collection of wooden buildings along Main Street, with the obligatory saloons, a couple of hotels, general stores, a bank, some other establishments of various purposes and reputations. But for you, coming off 4 months on the trail, it might as well be Paris. The The drive ends at the stockyards on the east side of town. The cattle are sorted, counted, branded where necessary, loaded into pens. The buyers are already there. Men from the Chicago meatpacking houses, from the Kansas City markets, from eastern firms that buy cattle on the hoof and sell them as beef. They walk through the pens with Archer, making notes, arguing about grades, discussing prices. The price for a longhorn steer in Wichita in 1873 is somewhere around $20 to $25. Multiply $20 by 1,200 cattle, minus the 9 lost on the drive, and you get a number that makes Benjamin Archer a wealthy man for this season. The drive cost money, wages, supplies, the toll in Indian Territory, but the margin is real. The reason this industry exists is real. You stand at the edge of the stockyards and watch the cattle you've lived with for 4 months disappear into pens, into the machinery of commerce, and you feel something that you don't have a word for. Not grief exactly, not satisfaction exactly. Something compound. Archer finds you. He hands you your wages. 4 months plus the final week. Call it $110 in gold coin. Without ceremony, the way he does everything. Good work, he says. Better than I expected when you signed on. You coming back in the spring? You look at the money in your hand. You look at the town. You look at the horizon to the south, which is where you came from, the direction the trail runs back toward Texas. Yes, sir, you say. I think I am. He nods. That seems to settle it. You get a room. This is the most remarkable sentence you've encountered. In 4 months, you get a room in a hotel. The Price Hotel on Douglas Avenue, which costs 75 cents a night and has a bed. A real bed with a mattress, with sheets, with a pillow, and a wash basin with actual clean water, and a window looking out onto the main street of Wichita. You sit on the edge of the bed for a while, just being aware of it. The mattress, the springs, the way it gives under your weight. You have forgotten what this feels like. Then there's the bath. The hotel has a bathhouse. It costs 25 cents for a bath. The tub is tin, large enough to actually sit in, and the woman who runs it, a Mrs. Doyle, who manages the whole operation with the efficiency of someone who has seen everything, heats the water herself with a coal stove. The water, when you lower yourself into it, is the colour of the Oklahoma plains. You don't look at it, you just sit in it. The heat of it reaches things that have been cold and stiff for 4 months. Your back, your shoulders, the permanent knot behind your left knee from a bad dismount in May. Your hands, which have been cracked and rough since early April, relax in the hot water in a way that's almost medicinal. Mrs. Doyle provides soap, real soap, not lye soap, something that smells like lavender, impossibly out of place here in Wichita, Kansas, in 1873. You wash your hair, you wash everything, 3 times. The water gets changed twice before you're done. You sit in the tub until the water cools to room temperature, and then you sit some more, because getting out means putting clothes back on and you're not ready for that yet. Eventually, Mrs. Doyle knocks on the door. Young man, there's line. You get out. Wichita has 2 kinds of places. The kind where respectable people go. The hotel, the general store, the church, the restaurant that serves actual meals at a table with actual silverware, and the kind where cowboys go. The cowboys go to Delano. Delano is technically a separate town just across the Arkansas River from Wichita proper. It exists specifically to accommodate things that Wichita's more respectable citizens don't want in their city limits. Saloons, dance halls, gambling establishments. the various other businesses that appear wherever large numbers of young men arrive with months of wages and limited plans. The Wichita City Marshal in 1873, that's Mike Meagher, a tough Irishman who will be replaced the following year by a young man named Wyatt Earp, has no jurisdiction in Delano. Which is the point of Delano. You go with Tom Weeks and Pete Garza because Tom is 19 and excited, and Pete goes everywhere with an air of calm curiosity, and you go partly out of interest and partly out of the feeling that you've earned something and you might as well find out what. The Long Branch... No, wait. That's Dodge City 2 years from now. In Wichita, it's the Keno House and the Buckhorn and several others without names that just have signs saying whiskey and cards and girls, and that covers the essential information. Inside the Keno House, it's loud in the way that spaces are loud when everyone in them is simultaneously relieved and celebrating. Cowboys from multiple drives are here. The drive from the Red River outfit that came in 2 days ahead of you. Men from an Abilene-bound herd that diverted, men who've been here a week already and are well into the process of spending what they earned. The smell, tobacco and whiskey and sawdust on the floor, and something that might be the residue of several previous evenings. The sound, piano, an actual piano, which you've not heard in 4 months. Being played in the far corner by a man who's either drunk or playing ragtime, and possibly both. People talking at the volume that people use when they've been talking to nobody but cattle, and 6 co-workers for months, and now have an entire room to talk at. Occasional laughter, occasional disagreement. You buy a whiskey. It costs 15 cents, which is a lot for a 15-cent whiskey. But this is Wichita in July, when the cattle drives are in, and the price of everything is accordingly adjusted for the market. You stand at the bar and drink it and watch the room. Tom Weeks finds a card game immediately and sits down with the focused intensity of a 19-year-old who's been thinking about this card game for 4 months. Pete Garza finds someone he knows, another cowboy from the Rio Grande Valley apparently, somebody he worked with on a different drive 2 years ago, and they fall into conversation in rapid Spanish. You stand at the bar. A man sits down next to you. He's 40 or so, well dressed for Wichita, which means his coat fits and his hat is recent, with a neat moustache and the particular alert posture of someone who's always watching everything. New in town, he asks. Just off the trail. Archer Drive out to South Texas. How many head? Started with 1,200. Lost. 9. He nods, doing arithmetic. Good run. The Canadian's been rough this year. It was rough. Name's Holloway. I buy cattle for a Chicago firm. He names the firm, which you recognise. They're one of the big meatpacking operations. Cal Calloway? Texas boy? Cuero? He nods again. He knows Cuero. He knows every town that produces cattle because that's his business. First drive? Yes, sir. You coming back? I told Archer yes. Holloway picks up his drink, looks at it thoughtfully. That's the thing about the trail, he says. It either finishes you or it gets its hooks in you. No middle ground. He pauses. Men who go back, they're not the same men who left. That ever bother you? Not so far, he smiles. It will. Eventually it will. But by then you won't be able to stop. He stands settling his hat. Enjoy Wichita, Mr. Calloway. You've earned it. He drifts off into the crowd. You order another whiskey. The piano plays something you almost recognise. The E, morning after, is instructive. Your body, which has been waking at 4:30 for 4 months regardless of when you went to sleep, wakes you at 4:30, in a hotel bed, in a room, in Wichita, Kansas. You lie there for a moment in the specific discomfort of the truly awake person who knows they don't need to get up but can't convince their body of this. Your back hurts from the mattress in a different way than it hurts from the ground. Your head is not at its clearest thanks to the Kino house. You get up. Main Street at 4:30 in the morning in Wichita is quiet in a way that 4 months of camps never were. The cattle drives keep ungodly hours, but a town keeps somewhat more human ones. Even Delano is quieter now. The saloons that stayed open all night have a dispersed, exhausted feel to them. The men still in them are either asleep at tables or playing cards with the focused desperation of people who have been at it too long. You walk down to the Arkansas River. The river at dawn is actually nice. Narrower than the rivers you've been crossing, slower, with cottonwoods lining both banks, birds, the sound of water over rocks. You sit on the bank and watch the sun come up. This is the thing about arriving, about finishing, after 4 months of forward motion, of the next river and the next camp and the next stretch of trail. Suddenly there is no next thing. The immediate future is, you have a hotel room and $110, and Archer isn't leaving until the week after next, and until then, your time is your own. You haven't had time that was your own since February. It feels strange. Like a muscle you've forgotten how to use. You sit by the river for an hour. You don't think about anything in particular. You watch the water. You listen to the birds. Then you go find breakfast. The general store opens at 7. Your first stop is the boots section. The right heel is split completely now. The crossing of the Canadian opened the crack into something structural, and you've been riding on borrowed time for 2 weeks. The boots in the general store cost $8. This is the good pair, proper cowboy boots, made for the work, with a heel high enough to catch the stirrup and a shaft tall enough to protect your leg and leather thick enough to matter. $8 out of 110. You try them on. They're stiff and new and the exact opposite of the broken-in comfortable shape that your current boots have taken over 4 months. They'll break in, the man behind the counter says. He says it with the confidence of a person who sells boots for a living. He's right. You know he's right. You've been through this once before. You buy them. You also buy a new rope, a replacement bandana, and some needles and thread for the shirts. $12 total. $98 remaining. You sit on a bench outside the store and lace up the new boots, and the stiffness of them is almost comforting. Something new. A thing that hasn't been shaped by the trail yet. A thing that still has its original form. You'll change that. By the time you leave Wichita, these boots will have started the process of becoming yours. By the end of next year's drive, they'll be as broken in and specific to you as the ones you just threw away. That's the cycle. Ned Colley finds you on your 3rd day in Wichita. You're at the hotel restaurant, the first sit-down meal you've had in 4 months, with an actual tablecloth. Eating fried eggs and potatoes, and Ned comes in, spots you, and sits down with the ease of a man who is comfortable everywhere. He orders coffee, black, 2 cups at once. How's the spending going? He asks. Boots, rope, a few other things. He nods approvingly. Smart. Some boys spend it all in the first week. Come back broke. Have to borrow from Archer to get home. Tom Weeks is down $40 at cards. Tom Weeks will learn or he won't. Ned says this without judgment, as a fact. First, drive is for learning. Second drive, you've got no excuse. He drinks his coffee. Outside the window, Main Street is doing its business. Wagons, horses, people moving with the purposeful energy of a town where everyone is making money. You told Archer you're coming back, Ned says. He told you. Archer tells me things. He's deciding whether to offer you a better position next year. You put your fork down. Swing rider. Maybe point if the other boys hold or move on. Point riders are the experienced men, the ones who work at the front of the herd. It's more responsibility, more skill, more judgment required. Am I ready for point? Not yet. Ned says it simply with no softening. But you will be. You think on your feet. You read the cattle well for someone with one drive, and you don't panic. He says this like it's the highest praise. A lot of men panic, young men especially. Something goes wrong and they freeze, or they do the wrong thing fast, which is worse than doing nothing. He looks at you. You froze at the Red River crossing for about 2 seconds. Then you did the right thing. I didn't think I froze. You did. 2 seconds. Then it was over and you were working. He shrugs. 2 seconds is fine. 2 seconds is human. 5 seconds gets cattle killed. 10 seconds gets cowboys killed. He finishes his coffee. Come back next year. Ride swing again. Watch the point riders the whole time. Ask questions. By the drive after that, you'll be ready. He stands to go. And Cal. He pauses at the door. Don't spend it all in Delano. The corner of his mouth moves. That's Ned Colley's version of a smile. He walks out. Let me tell you what Wichita is in the larger story. Wichita in 1873 is one of several Kansas cattle towns that exist because of a specific equation. Cattle are worth $5 a head in Texas and $25 a head in the East, and the railroad is the difference. The Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, the branch. Lines have been spreading outwards since then, and wherever a rail line ends, a cattle town appears, because that's where the trail drive meets the meatpacking industry, and the meeting of those two things generates money with a violence that creates institutions very quickly. The Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railroad reached Wichita in 1872. The cattle drives followed immediately, and now Wichita has hotels, restaurants, banks, stores, newspapers, churches, schools, the entire apparatus of a settled community, all built on the foundation of cattle money. It won't last. This is the thing about cattle towns, and about the cattle drive era generally. The window is narrow. The trail drives exist because there is no railroad in Texas. Once there is a railroad in Texas, which is coming, which is being built right now, the cattle don't have to walk to Kansas. They can ride. The drives become unnecessary. The peak years of the Chisum Trail are roughly 1867 to 1886. Less than 20 years. Within that window, something like 5 to 10 million cattle made the walk north. The men who drove them, somewhere between 10 and 40,000 cowboys total over the whole era, depending on how you count, made a world out of it that became one of the defining myths of American culture. The myth will last much longer than the reality. You don't know this. You can't know this. In 1873, the Chisum Trail seems as permanent as anything. You're 22 years old and you've just done your first drive and Archer's offered you a better position for next year, and the future stretches out ahead of you in a direction that seems clear. You'll be back next year, and the year after, and maybe the year after that. And then, not because of anything you do wrong, but because the world changes around you, it will be over. But that's later. That's for another version of you, an older one to deal with. Right now, you're in Wichita in July of 1873 with new boots and $98 and the whole future open. That's not nothing. That's everything. On your 5th day in Wichita, you write a letter. The hotel has paper. The man at the desk has a pen and ink he'll loan you for a nickel, which seems like a lot for a pen and ink, but this is Wichita in July. You sit at the small desk in your room and write to your mother and father in Cuero. You've never been a particularly good writer. Schooling in Cuero was practical and limited. Enough to read, enough to write, enough arithmetic to manage accounts. The letter comes out slowly, words that don't quite say what you mean. But you try. You tell them about the drive. You tell them about the crossing of the Red River and the nights on guard and the storm that came up over the Canadian and the way the sky looks when there's no light for 100 miles in every direction. You tell them about Cookie and Ned and Pete and the fact that you can now saddle a horse in total darkness by feel alone. You tell them you're coming back next spring. You don't tell them about the stampede. You don't tell them about the 3 nights in a row after the Canadian crossing, where the weather was bad and the cattle were restless, and nobody slept more than 2 hours. You don't tell them about the specific physical way that months of the trail accumulate in your body, the stiffness that doesn't fully go away even after a week of hotel beds, the way your hands are shaped differently now, broader and calloused, from months of rope and reins. You don't tell them because the telling of it would worry them, and because the truth of it is that even the hard parts were something, and you can't quite explain what something means in this context without sounding like you've lost your mind. You tell them you've saved most of your wages. You tell them you're well. You tell them you'll be home before winter. You seal it and give it to the man at the desk, who explains the postal service arrangements in Wichita, which are real and functional because the railroad brought civilization and the postal service is what civilization runs on. You pay for the postage. You walk back outside. The street is busy. The sun is hot. The cattle pens at the edge of town smell exactly the way cattle pens smell. You stand there for a moment just in the middle of Wichita's main street, in the middle of 1873, and you breathe. Here's something that nobody talks about. Time on the trail is different. In Cuero, in any town, in any normal life, time is divided. Days have shapes. Mornings feel different from afternoons. Weekdays feel different from Sundays. Months have texture. March and July are different things. On the trail, time is continuous. There's no Sunday. There's no off day. There's no morning that doesn't immediately become a working day. The cattle don't observe the Sabbath, and neither can you. The only measurement that matters is, are we moving or are we stopped? Are we safe or is something wrong? Is the weather good or is it going to kill something? This creates a strange relationship with time that you've only noticed now that you're in a place where time is structured again. 4 months passed on the trail in a way that felt both endless. Each day stretched long by 12 hours of work, and instantaneous. You blink and it's July. You blink and you're in Kansas. You're not sure how to feel about this. You lost 4 months of your life in one sense. 4 months you'll never have back. 4 months that are just a gap now in the calendar of your existence. But you also gained them. You gained 4 months of experience so dense that it doesn't compress into a normal timeline. It sits in your memory like a physical object. The way Wichita is hitting you after the trail is partly this sudden return of shaped time. The sense that morning is for one thing and afternoon for another and Sunday is different. Your body recognizes it and responds with something like relief, and also something like loss, because the formlessness of trail time had its own freedom in it. Ned Colley told you once, between camps, that after enough drives you stop keeping track of dates entirely. You know it's spring because the bluebonnets are out, he said. You know it's summer because you're sweating. You know it's fall because the nights get cold, that's enough. You asked him if he missed knowing the date. He thought about it for a while, the way he thinks about things. Sometimes, he said, when someone back home has a birthday, then I miss it. He paused. But mostly no. Dates are for people who have appointments to keep. He rode off to check on a steer that had drifted. You've thought about that since. On your last full day in Wichita, you climb something. This sounds more dramatic than it is. Wichita is flat. The whole region is flat. But there's a ridge, a low one, at the eastern edge of town, where the land rises slightly above the Arkansas bottomland, and from up there you can see a fair distance. You climb it in the late afternoon when the light is good and the heat is starting to ease. What you see, Wichita spread below you, such as it is, the wooden buildings of Main Street, the smoke rising from the hotel kitchen and the restaurant and the forge, the cattle pens with their remaining animals, the railroad cutting east-west through the southern edge of town, straight and iron and permanent looking, which is the point of railroads, that they look permanent. The river, the bridge over the Arkansas, the flat country of Delano on the south bank, and beyond all of it, the prairie, rolling away in every direction to distances that the eye can't resolve into specific things. Just grass and sky. The same grass and sky you've been riding through for 4 months. From up here, it looks peaceful. From up here, you can see maybe 30 miles on a clear day. 30 miles of the southern plains, and beyond those 30 miles, more plains, and beyond those, Texas, and beyond Texas, eventually Mexico, eventually something else, eventually ocean. You've moved through this landscape for 6 months, walked 1,200 animals across a substantial fraction of it, and from up here, the distance you've covered looks like nothing. The land is so large, so genuinely enormous, that your whole drive, hundreds of miles, is invisible in it. This is either humbling or clarifying, depending on how you're inclined. You watch the sun go down. The light on the prairie at evening is the light you've been watching for 4 months, and you know it now. The way it goes from bright to gold to copper to something almost pink at the horizon, and the sky above goes from blue to indigo, and the first stars appear in the east before the sun is even fully down in the west. You watch it. The wind comes across from the southwest, carrying the smell of grass and dry earth, and the distant possibility of rain. Tomorrow Archer's drive crew starts, breaking up. People going their various directions. Tom Weeks is taking a stage east to visit family. Pete Garza is riding south to the Rio Grande Valley home. The Fenn brothers have heard about work on a ranch in Colorado. Ned Colley is staying in Wichita for another week, doing what Ned Colley does in Wichita for a week each year, and then he'll ride back to Texas and sign on with another drive and do it again. He's been doing it since 1858. You'll ride south with the mail stage, back to Texas, back to Cuero, back to your parents' house that smells like your mother's cooking and your father's pipe tobacco. And then, in February, you'll come back. The last night, the hotel room, the bed that your body has started to relearn over the past week. You lie on your back and look at the ceiling, actual ceiling, plaster, not the sky, and you think about the 6 months, the things you lost, comfort, cleanliness, the shape of time, a few pounds of weight from your frame that you hadn't thought you could spare, the easy assumption that tomorrow would be predictable, the things you gained, a competence that lives in your hands, the ability to navigate darkness, the understanding of how 1,200 animals think, a knowledge of the land between Cuero and Wichita that is so detailed it's almost cartographic, the sense, and this is the hardest one to name, that you found out what you're made of, at least in part. You don't know what you're made of completely. You're 22. Nobody knows at 22, but you know more than you did in February. Ned said, the trail either finishes you or gets its hooks in you. You know which one it is for you. The hooks are in. You don't know how deep yet, but they're in. You think about the Canadian crossing, the 6 cattle lost, the moment before you went in, when you looked at the red-brown current and calculated your odds, and then just went in anyway because there was no other option, and the herd was going. That moment, that was you deciding something, not consciously, not in words, but your body made a decision that your mind was still catching up to, and the decision was forward, and you went. You're not sure you knew that about yourself before March. Outside, Wichita is settling into its late-night version of itself. The piano in the Keno house has stopped. The cattle in the pens are quiet. Somewhere a dog is barking, then stops. The stars would be out, but you can't see them through the ceiling. You close your eyes. You're tired in the pleasant, specific way of someone who has genuinely earned their rest. Not the grinding exhaustion of the trail. Something cleaner. The tiredness of a person who finished something. You finished something. Tomorrow you start the next thing. The stage south leaves Wichita at 6 in the morning. You're on it. The stage is a Concord coach, the kind with the leather thoroughbraces instead of springs, which means it sways rather than bounces, which is better in theory and not entirely better in practice. 4 other passengers, a woman returning to a homestead south of the Kansas line, 2 businessmen from Chicago, a young man about your age who doesn't say where he's going. The route south follows the trail in reverse. You recognize landmarks from the drive, but from the opposite direction, going south instead of north, they look different. The Canadian River crossing, the Wichita, the country that flattens and browns as you move toward Indian Territory. You watch it out the window. The toll station where Archer paid the Cherokee man. The creek where the cattle found good grass and Archer let them rest an extra hour. The campsite where the thunderstorm hit. It all looks smaller from the stage, less overwhelming. Or maybe you're larger. Here's what happens next. You spend the winter in Cuero. Your mother cries when she sees you, briefly, and then pretends she didn't. Your father shakes your hand and says good work and means considerably more than those 2 words contain. You eat well. You sleep in a real bed. Your hands start to soften slightly, though they never quite go back to what they were. You tell people about the drive. They listen with the kind of attention people give to things that are beyond their experience. The women at the church ask polite questions. The men at the saloon ask about the cattle, the money, the specifics of the work. You tell them the true version, all of it. The cold and the dust and the long hours and the river crossings and the night guard and the specific smell of 1,200 longhorns in the morning heat. And the beauty. You tell them about the sky, about the grass going gold in the late afternoon, about the stars visible from the Oklahoma prairie at midnight. They nod. They appreciate the story, but they weren't there. And the distance between being there and hearing about it is the distance between a river and a picture of a river. In February, Archer writes, he's putting together a drive, 1,400 head this time. He wants you for a swing, with the possibility of moving to point by mid-drive if you're ready. $30 a month. $30, not $25. He remembers. You write back the same day. Yes. Spring comes. The bluebonnets bloom south of Cuero along the creek, exactly the way Ned said they would. The days get longer. The air starts to carry heat. You pack your saddlebags. You check your new boots, broken in now, shaped to your feet, as comfortable as the ones you threw away in Wichita. You ride north, out of Cuero, toward Benjamin Archer's ranch. The trail is ahead of you. Again. Let me tell you what you're part of, standing at the beginning of your second drive. The cattle industry of the American West in the 1870s is the mechanism by which the Great Plains gets economically integrated into the rest of the country. It's not a romantic thing. It's a business. Beef, market demand, supply chains. But the scale of it is genuinely extraordinary. Between 1866 and 1886, somewhere between 5 and 10 million cattle walk the Chisum Trail and its variants north from Texas to the Kansas railheads. The beef feeds an industrial nation that's growing too fast. Cities filling with workers who need protein and can't raise their own cattle, who need something to eat that can be produced at scale. The cowboys who drive those cattle, maybe 30 or 40,000 men over the whole era, are the logistics workers of the American meat supply. That's not poetic. That's what they are. Working men doing a job that needed doing it in conditions that were genuinely extreme, getting paid wages that were reasonable by the standards of the time. The romance comes later. The dime novels start almost immediately. The first fictional cowboys appear in print in the 1870s, while the real ones are still working. Wild West shows begin in 1883 while the trail is still active. By the time the drives end in the late 1880s, the mythology is already larger than the reality. The mythology will go on forever. The men who built it, Ned Colley and Pete Garza and Cookie and you, Cal Calloway from Cuero, and thousands like them, will mostly be forgotten individually. Their names don't last. Their specific contributions don't last. The mythology absorbs them and makes them into one thing, the generic cowboy, which is both tribute and erasure. But they were real. They smelled real. They were cold and tired and hungry and occasionally genuinely frightened in the way that real people in real danger are. They slept on the ground. They slept in their clothes. They didn't bathe for months. They drove the cattle north. It's late now. Wherever you are, whatever your day was, it's late. And I've kept you long enough in 1873 with the cattle and the dust and the Oklahoma stars, and it's time to let you sleep. But before I do, one more thing. The cowboys who did this work were mostly very young men. The average age on a cattle drive crew was somewhere around 24. Boys from Texas farm families who needed money. Boys from the post-Civil War South with nowhere else to go. Men from Mexico and from the formerly enslaved communities. Native Americans who knew the land better than anyone. Young, mostly broke. Working incredibly hard in conditions that would be illegal in any modern workplace by such a long margin that the comparison doesn't even pass. And somehow, from the accumulated experience of those young men and those drives and those hundreds of miles of open country, came one of the most enduring images in American culture, the cowboy. It's everywhere. You grew up with it. Everybody did. Movies and books and songs and the shorthand of a certain kind of American toughness, a certain relationship with the open land, a certain way of moving through a hard world without complaint. That came from real people doing real work, from sleeping on the ground because there was nothing else to sleep on, from riding in their clothes because there was no time to change, from going months without a bath because there was no water to spare and no tub within 100 miles, from the sound of 1,200 cattle moving across the Oklahoma prairie at dawn, from the stars over Kansas at midnight, from the coffee at 4:30 in the morning and the cold ground and the cracking boots and the cracking heels and the long, long, long ride north. So let it settle. All of it. The smell of horse and smoke and coffee and prairie grass. The sound of the herd breathing. The specific quality of the sky at the edge of morning. Let them fade. You're not on the trail. You're not in Wichita. You're not anywhere near 1873. You're warm. You're safe. You're clean. Genuinely, luxuriously, impossibly clean by the standards of everything I've described tonight. Think about that for a moment. The person listening to this right now has had access to hot running water today, has probably slept in a bed last night, has not, in all likelihood, checked their boots for rattlesnakes this morning. These things are gifts. I'm not being sentimental about it. I'm saying the specific baseline of comfort that most of you have right now, tonight, is something that the Cowboys of the Chisum Trail would have considered extraordinary, would have considered luxury. You're warm enough, safe enough, comfortable enough. That's more than most people throughout most of history. That's genuinely more. Let that land for a second, and then let it go. Let the thinking slow. Let the body sink into whatever you're lying on, which is considerably softer than any ground Cal Calloway ever slept on. Let the sounds of your world, whatever they are, traffic, wind, the house settling, the breathing of whoever is near you, let them become background. Let them become the cattle lowing at the edge of the firelight, the coyotes at a distance, the wind over the Oklahoma grass. These sounds are not dangerous. These sounds mean everything is as it should be. Nothing needs your attention right now. Nothing is going wrong. The herd is settled. The night guard is out. The fire is banked. You've ridden your miles today. Tomorrow will come, the way it always comes. Tomorrow there will be things to do, the way there are always things to do. But tomorrow is tomorrow. Right now is just this. The slow drift. The particular darkness behind your closed eyes. The sound of your own breathing going steady and slow. Somewhere in 1873 on the Oklahoma prairie, Cal Calloway is on night guard, riding circles round 1,200 sleeping cattle, humming something he only half remembers, watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars you can't see right now, behind your ceiling, behind your clouds. But they're there. They've been there since before people walked under them. They'll be there long after. The cattle drive ended. The Chisum Trail ended. Wichita became a different kind of city. The open range gave way to fences, and the fences gave way to highways, and the highways gave way to everything that is now. But the stars over the Oklahoma prairie are the same stars, and people still get tired, and the day still ends, and the body still knows when it's time to let go. Let go. Let the weight of the day go into the mattress, into the ground, into whatever holds you. Let your hands relax. They've held enough today. Let your eyes rest behind their lids. They've seen enough. Let your thoughts thin out and drift like smoke from a campfire, slowly dispersed by the prairie wind, gone into the air. You've earned this rest. Take it. The night is long and quiet. The herd is calm. The stars are out. Good night.